So this is technically our general meeting, which is when we can share updates from the different bioregions that are here. So Cleveland, Rochester, Toronto, Buffalo. And Susie, if you would like to share as you are kind of exploring your bioregion. Hello, David.
Oops. There it is. Now we can wave hi.
Hello.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi.
And then Victoria as well.
Hey, Victoria.
So David and Victoria, we actually just finished our check-ins. If you would like to share, and we actually did not share how we are showing up, but we shared where we are, our names and where we are. So like what watershed you're in, what bioregion you would identify with, or what indigenous tribes land you live on. So yeah, if you guys would
We
like
live on the unceded lands of the Haudenosaunee. In Rochester, New York, and I forget what else you said, but
yeah, watershed, but that's essentially
watershed.
where you are.
I need to find, but the Genesee River, I guess that's the one. I need myself educated. Okay.
And I'm across the lake from Rochester in Takaranto, or now called Toronto. This is the Dish with One Spoon Treaty Covenant in wampum. It is actually an ancient treaty that goes way back to the Haudenosaunee Confederacy sometime around 1,200 years ago. But it was revived in 1761 in a treaty between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe, on whose land we are now, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. And this is actually recognized as their territory by Treaty 13. So it has been Wendat land, it has been Seneca land, but it really was always Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe. So this is the Greater Toronto or Greater Takaranto bioregion, defined by the Oak Ridges Moraine to the north and the Niagara Escarpment to the west. And there's several smaller river watersheds. I'm right at the watershed of the Humber River, the Gabiganong Zibi in the Anishinaabe-Moan. And that is a sacred river to me anyway. And one of my places I love to go and meditate beside it, honor, sing to it. We've interviewed her. We have, I presented tobacco and sing the beautiful Anishinaabe water song given to us by Elder and Water Walker, Josephine Mandamin. Anyway, I'll stop there. I could keep going and going.
Yeah, well, thank you, David. Is this your first time joining this meeting, or have you been on one of these before?
I've been on some, but I don't know if it was this meeting or not. I don't know, Jonathan. Maybe you can remind me if I was if the right. I've been at one of these, and I think it might be one of these.
Okay.
And David is well, he's connected with the Takaranto project and specifically leads or consults to leadership of the nonprofit that is working specifically in Toronto, the city of Toronto.
Yeah, the Regenerating Toronto is what we call it, which has evolved from Drawdown, which has evolved from Unified Toronto, which has evolved from Awakening the Dreamer, the Pachamama group. So there's several iterations of this particular theme.
There's lots and lots of connections. We've stayed with David. He was very generous, he and his wife, when we were up visiting Brian and Susan. So these guys are really great, and David is expert in a number of things of interest, indigenous and behavioral.
Wonderful. Are you familiar with the Legacy Project in Toronto?
Yes, yeah. I'm in correspondence with Brian, and particularly Brian. Yeah. Really looking forward to the summit coming up in February.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, so I was just saying that this is kind of the general meeting where we typically will go around and provide updates from each of the different bioregions that are here. And then, you know, at the end, we can have a more of an open discussion, because that's what the other weeks are. Once every 4 weeks, we meet to provide each other updates, and then the weeks in between are kind of just an open campfire for whoever wants to come and see who else shows up and have an open discussion. So would anybody like to go first, just sharing either what they are doing individually on their land, or what organizations they're part of are doing? Rochester, or Toronto, or Cleveland?
I'm happy to go first.
Okay.
So Cleveland has had a long history in holding dialogues about bioregionalism, led by speakers that we had at our meeting in February that included inviting Joe Brewer and Penny to come to Cleveland.
Peter, you're a little quiet. Would you mind, I don't know if you tip it or if, yeah, speak a little louder?
Thank you. Apologies. Shall I start again? So is that better?
Yes.
Sorry, I forgot I was on an external speaker. So sorry, everybody. Cleveland has had a long history with regards to exploring the concept of bioregions, led by some of the pioneers that we had along with Joe Brewer for a meeting we held in February, featuring his own Joe, courtesy of the Legacy Project and his kind of Great Lakes tour. David Beach organized a report in 1999, the Citizens Action Plan on Regenerating Bioregions. David Orr is well known to many of you as an environmental activist, also participated. He's from Oberlin, which is about 45 minutes away. Cleveland's had a long history, aside from that, associated particularly with the burning river that contributed to some of the attention paid that eventually led to the creation of Earth Day. So we held this conference to try to revitalize and reinvigorate with Joe's energy and Penny's energy, which of course is considerable. And the other players that sometimes are on this call are Kim Chappell, who's a lovely woman, also at my same university, Case Western Reserve University. David Nash, who's worked on the business and legal community. And Jillian Williams, who's an undergraduate at Case. I can really mainly focus on the domains that we're working in follow-up. And I'd say it's slow. The first is actually David's domain, which is the business school and business in general. And I don't know, I'll take another couple of minutes here and just go through those three domains. So for example, we just had a entire appreciative inquiry, the entire management school trying to plan our future, where we tried to incorporate regionalism, bioregionalism in that conversation with limited success, I might add. I'm a physician, I work in the health space, and we're fortunate to have as a champion the executive dean of one of our two medical schools in town, the Cleveland Clinic, Bud Isaacson. And we're planning a conference in March the 14th and 15th, which is going to be regional. And again, maybe bioregional. That group is called Health and Climate Education. That's their focus. So we've got the business domain, the health domain. The one that I'm particularly intrigued with is the arts and culture domain. So within the last week, I've met with the Senior Vice President for Strategy at the Natural History Museum and the new Executive Director of our Botanical Gardens and Arboretum. These museums are located in a place we call University Circle, where the universities and many of our teaching hospitals are engaged geographically, if not conceptually, with these museums. The idea is to do a project which I actually had thought about, but when I was at Oxford, UK recently, all the Oxford museums got together and they did an exhibit in which there was a a show at each museum connected conceptually called the Museum of Climate Hope. I'm trying to work on the idea that the museums might develop something focused around art and civilization and transformation and bioregionalism. So those are the three domains I've been tracking. But we don't have a central location like the Legacy Project. We don't have a place that could be the activation center, that could be the learning center. Dave is on the, whatever Joe calls it, the guiding committee for the Design Institute. And I continue to be tracking what Joe is doing with ecoversities, learning centers, and design institutes, because I do personally believe that the secret to this is to create spaces to learn deeply about the challenges we face. So that's my report from Cleveland. I'm sure if Kim and David were here, they'd add to that, but or Jillian, but I'm the only one here today. So, delighted to represent our great city of Cleveland. Or that's not right. Yes, but to represent our great Northeast Ohio, Southern Shore of Lake Erie bioregion. Thank you all.
Thanks, Peter. That's really exciting about the regional, possibly bioregional conference, because I know you've been working on that for a while. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Peter?
Well, I could follow up, because what we're planning is actually not far removed from that. And that is that we are collaborating with the Water Docs Film Festival coming up in 2 weeks. And we're sort of responsible for the final day, which is supposed to be a town hall, which is kind of a semi-town hall. But nevertheless, our feature is the Erie situation, focusing on the algae blooms from the agricultural runoff in Ohio, and some of the politics around trying to remedy that. And we have a panel set up to follow that, featuring Mohawk elder Diane Longboat, to kind of set the stage. Followed, and she lives in the Six Nations of the Grand River, which flows right into Lake Erie on the Ontario side. And so she has a very direct connection with the lake. Also, Sue Graham's partner, Owen Goetz, will be speaking on the Riverdale Farm and that regenerative farm and forest restoration that they're involved with on the watershed of the Credit River, which flows into Lake Ontario. And they're doing marvelous stuff there. And then we've got someone from Swim Drink Fish, who specializes in the Lake Erie situation, and then a young woman, Rachel Parent, who's involved with the youth agriculture and food production. So I think we've got a really good panel. I hope we can bring it together into real action format, but at least it's a start. And so I'm really, let's say, curious and excited to see where this is going to go. So that'll be on the weekend of the 17th to 19th at the University of Toronto. So it follows from Peter's project.
Yeah.
And
Well,
they fit in.
If both of you could share, I don't know if there's like a registration link or a flyer that either of you or both of you would like to share for your events, so that we can let people know about it. Would be great.
Yeah, the festival is in person, but there will be access to the films for a certain amount of time online following the festival.
So could I jump in and respond to that request, Anna? So this is a conference for healthcare professionals. So it's going to be pretty open, but it is actually designed to teach about the climate crisis. So I'm not sure whether it's appropriate to share that link or not, but let me talk to the group. Let me
Mhm.
also remind and say hello to David and say I have a faculty appointment at the University of Toronto, and I've worked with Brian and Susan in the Legacy Project for probably 10 years now. So I'm particularly intrigued by, as Anna knows, her own work, Anna's work, at bringing the bioregions together, even just the ones around the Great Lakes, let alone Cascadia and beyond. I guess you said you kind of know Brian a bit. I mean, the challenge in Cleveland is coordinating night-eye of activity. And I wondered, are you involved at all? And can you update us in the idea that Joe may become and Penny may be coming back into Toronto, and it may just be virtually. I don't know. And let me just say, I appreciate the richness of your Indigenous connections. One of the challenges we have in Cleveland, and I'll take that on myself, is the Indigenous communities are a little bit um, I don't want to. I want to use an accurate and polite word. A little bit dissipated. So it's a little hard for us to figure out how to engage folks. We have a new member of the faculty who actually studied uh, his own tribal group in Oklahoma, which is a little far away from Cleveland. So we're having a little challenge getting the indigenous connections made in Cleveland. So anyway, that's just a few responses to what you said, David.
Well, I teach, or I should say, coordinate a course at U of T called Indigenous Issues in Health and Healing, which has been a 30-plus-year learning journey for me, and but has afforded me connection with the communities, particularly Diane, who was actually instrumental in setting up the course back in 1992. And so we've been friends ever since. So there's that personal relationship, but also through my participation in ceremonies and academic, as well as um, personal connections. It's been really rewarding and tremendous learning for me. So you learn a lot of humility when you deal with Indigenous people.
David is very humble. He actually spent years taking care of the healthcare needs of various tribes in the uppermost regions of Canada.
A little bit.
So could I just extend that for one more minute, Anna? So I'm a physician, David, and actually I've done some work with Kristen Jacklin, who was at Northern Ontario School of Medicine and worked with the Wikwemigon on Manitoulin Island.
Right.
So I'm actually writing a paper on Indigenous ideas of aging and changes in cognition. I didn't call it dementia. And I didn't know you. I am delighted to meet your spirit. So thank you. I will look you up, as they say.
I'm a retired dentist. Actually, I was responsible for the dental health of the Cree, the Swampy Cree, the Mushkogawuk in the west coast of James Bay, from Moose Factory up to Hudson Bay. And so that was a 3-year learning journey for me as well. And I guess my real introduction to Indigenous culture and cultures, or bits of it here and there. It has actually evolved a lot since the early 70s when I was up there. Mm-hmm.
I haven't ever seen Peter smile, but you got the biggest smile I've ever seen from him. Not that he's not very warm. He is. He's very warm and generous. But I could tell that, David, you really tapped a nerve.
Oh, that's so lovely of you to say. I will say one more thing in response to that, David. I love the humility, not the fact that you used the word, but I guess the fact that I felt that from you, which I think is such an important attribute of becoming an elder, should we say.
I had to learn the hard way.
Wow. Wonderful. Well, yeah, thank you, David, and thank you, Peter. And I guess since we are in the Toronto or Takaranto bioregion, Elliot, do you have anything that you would like to share with the group at all?
Yeah, so I've lost my phone stand, but I can get it. So let's see if this is sort of coherent. I'm feeling a lot of momentum around this framework of specialization, modularity, and partnership. The specialization is, ooh, we got wild leek country represented.
Hi, Bea.
Hi there. Sorry, I was on another call that, that I wanted to check in and see how my friends in the Great Lakes are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Elliot was just sharing what's new for him, and then when he's done, you can definitely jump in and do your check-in if you'd like.
Sure.
Awesome.
It's a good time to be harvesting wild leek seeds right now. Yeah. So yes, specialization, modularity, and partnership, feeling this momentum growing around it. The specialization is forestry on private lands for the most part, although there are really no boundaries around it. And the kind of issue challenge is that a lot of our forests have various levels of ecological degradation going on. And we as humans can step in as keystone species to improve the structural and biological diversity to increase life. And that isn't happening because of some of the logistical and economic constraints, which is where the modular aspect comes in. And it's creating, I used to be a chef, so I'm seeing it kind of as like creating a menu of options. And some of those options I'm learning from people like Owen and Riverdale Farm and from many, many other people as well. And yeah, I'm getting some, it's starting to become tangible, not just ideas. So that's cool. And then the partnership is, yeah, it's like all the little partnerships that go into making it happen. And I'd say I've done pretty well considering I've only been working on this for 6 months, this particular problem. At other stuff that feeds into it a lot longer. But yeah, they're starting to happen. And then we can use that specialized type of approach that we have, which isn't prescriptive, but is based on a series of inquiries that lead us to something that's appropriate for the local context to, yeah, form bigger partnerships across the landscape. And yeah, basically like, those are a whole bunch of words, but I'd basically be able to roll in with a whole bunch of abilities to restore the soil, restore the trees, create more life. And yeah, it's so diverse and varied. And that's about all I can say about it for now, without going off on a massive rant in 20 different directions. So over to you, Bea.
Well, thanks. I'm sorry I missed the other introductions. I'm a native Midwesterner born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, grew up outside of Philadelphia where my family lived while I was growing up. And then after university in Montreal at McGill, I wound up back in the Midwest. And and I also had lived in California for a little bit. So I had been exposed to all of that Midwest, flat, boring, not happening, etc., which of course is a load of shit. But anyway, I had the experience of rediscovering that part of the planet, and at the same time, part of what really enriched that experience was that I wound up studying a 1-year program in creation-centered spirituality at Mundelein College, just north of Chicago, where I met Thomas Berry and heard the word bioregion for the first time. And it was just like, wow, this is a whole nother perspective that I hadn't had. And and, working with Thomas and Matthew Fox, who was the main teacher of that program, what was just a life-changing experience. And it's part of what led me to Mexico, where I have now been for the last 20 some years. And now I'm about to go back up north because my family is saying, Mom, get back, we miss you, come, etc. So that's just my general experience, but I really was happy to see that there is a group in the Great Lakes, although your focus, as far as I can see, is on the eastern end, which I know less well. I was more engaged at the Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, that area, more in the middle. Well, it's Lake Superior too, to some extent. And I still I'm still discovering things I just about those lakes and their history and how they were, discovered and what do you want to say? I want to say sort of used or exploited. I guess that's the word, by the people who were settling around them and everything. And I think there's still so much to learn about the region and its peculiarities and its gifts, and that we still have, I don't know, I haven't lived in the region for a long time now, but I always had the impression that there was a kind of inferiority complex, that the two coasts of the North America were where it was all happening, and in the middle it's all boring and flat and nothing. And we know that's just ridiculous. But anyway, there was the work that we did in Chicago, which was significant. I mean, it was a huge learning experience for all of us who were engaged to think, well, where are we really, and what was here before, and how are we relating to what's here now? And it was fascinating. Just we made our own backyard the place where we, just dedicated ourselves to understanding what's here, who's here, what are they doing, why are they doing, and then occasionally there'd be a more a bigger scale issue that we would want to know more about. This one that comes to mind was there was a talk about a need for a third airport for Chicago, and so we were curious about that, and so we arranged to go visit the people who lived in the area, which was more toward the south end of Chicago, to see what it was like and how would having a big airport in the middle of everything affect them and all that. And we went almost like representatives from another world, another, I don't know, because we were from from a different part of the region, but we were well received and we learned a lot. And so that was that kind of taking field trips was in our own region was one of our practices that we did that helped us to grow as a group and in our understanding. And I can, if there's ever a need or interest, I can tell more about what the things that we actually did that got people involved. But it was one of the most inspired pieces of work I've ever done, was coming to know, where am I? What is this place, and what should everybody else who lives here know about it? So anyway, that's my brief introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Pia. And I'd like to say that I think the only reason why we're focused on the eastern part of the Great Lakes is just because so far there haven't been anybody coming from the western part of the Great Lakes into the design school. But that's always something that we're very interested in, getting more people from across
Sure.
the subcontinent in here. So yeah, but thanks and it's always so great to hear about like the bioregional movement that really was happening and then just kind of went dormant, and in the 90s, and now it's back. So great to learn from you.
But it's still such a powerful, just the idea of the concept of bioregion. It's like, it really just changes your whole perspective. And now, I mean, here in Mexico, bioregion hasn't become an absolutely well-known concept, but they're in the central part of the, well, north central, I guess. I live about 90 kilometers from Mexico City, so there and that region, that population, and is in part of something that is known as the Bosque de Agua, the water forest. Now, I can guarantee you that 99% of the people who live in it, if you said, well, the water forest, they're like, but it's just like blank. And there's some exceptions. Academics are doing some work in that area and everything else, but it's still something I'm quite passionate and interested in because it's interesting.
Could I jump in and make a connection there, Anna?
Yep,
Lovely to hear you. So this is the 100th anniversary of Teilhard de Chardin's noosphere. And of course, Thomas Berry was the director of the Teilhard Association in New York, of which I was a member. And they just held a celebration of that. And I'll be going to a conference in Berkeley on the science of the noosphere. I think this is a very important concept. It's like the mind of Gaia, if I could put it that way. So in some sense, it's a global footprint, but it does represent, in some sense, a concept in which we're acting to bring the conversations between the bioregions together. So there's a kind of noospheric entry in the noosphere of bioregionalism. We really do have to participate the particular characteristics of individual bioregions, but also recognize the commonalities that we and challenges we face. And a friend of mine is Mary Evelyn Tucker, who, along with was the author of the recent biography of Thomas Berry. You probably know her work. She's at the Yale School of Forestry, where they run the religion and ecology, or spirituality and ecology group, I believe.
That is really exciting to me to hear. I mean, it's rare to find a group, and that's what I've been attracted to in this larger one, where you say bioregion and people don't look like you, just what, and then to have familiar names like Thomas, like Mary. Well, when I go back to the States, I'm going to Connecticut because that's where my children are living and my grandchildren. So I expect to I'm hoping to, I know she's not teaching. I think she just recently stepped down from teaching, but she's still at Yale, I think, and in that region. So I'm hoping to connect personally with her and her husband. Once I'm established out there, but yeah, and the other person that you may know is Brian Swim, the cosmologist. He was also on the faculty of the program I was in with Matt Fox in Mundelein. So it was amazing. We met Thomas Berry and Matt Fox and Brian Swim all in 1 year. I mean, whoa.
Now we're going beyond Gaia. We're going to the Journey of the Universe, a film I'd recommend everybody see that Brian did with Mary Evelyn Tucker and others. Yeah, absolutely. Lovely to connect with you.
And what did you call that film, Peter?
It's called The Journey of the Universe.
Okay.
And we're really kind of putting bioregions into a very large perspective here. Pretty soon we'll invite the bioregions in Mars. Of course, they have to have a bio to be regionalized. They do have traces of water and some organic compounds, so you never know. It's called The Journey of the Universe, and he's part of this deep time network. The idea that we need to look at bioregions in the context of 14 billion years of history, and that gets into the Big History Association and a bunch of other folks that take a hugely long-term and broad perspective on where we are on the planet today.
Yeah, I still think about when you and Dave brought up like actually creating a course that can help teach some of this stuff. You know, I think that I do have a Great Lakes Atlas that I think might have been something that you recommended for me, that and I'm just wondering if maybe gathering some of the things that we could just put the Great Lakes into some historical perspective, if we want to have a bit of an archive in that Google Drive that I created a long time ago, and I can reshare with everybody. But that might be something interesting to do as a group, just kind of start collecting information like that.
And you know, sorry to build on that idea, there are, every bioregion is important, but the Great Lakes are about 20% of the world's fresh water, as is the Amazon. So I actually have a few connections down in Brazil, Argentina. I think you know, it's terrible to be aligned by a number like 20%, but I mean those are huge sources of water for the planet, and of course, rightfully so. The Amazon gets a lot more attention because of the politics and the deforestation. Although Elliot's comments, I'm particularly interested in trees and forests, as Elliot knows. His comments about the health of the forests in Ontario are concerning. And actually, I will say one other thing, because I bought air purifiers for the house because of the forest fires in Quebec. And we often thought of Canada as being a place we'd all move to, either Canada or Norway, because you have even more fresh water than the Great Lakes, and you might, you know, benefit from a longer growing season. But quite frankly, Canada's forest fires are just, they ought to draw as much attention as the Amazon in the sense of their ecological impact.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and I think just before we move on to Rochester, I think that I do want to share something that's going on in Buffalo, and that Elliot actually is helping out a little bit with. And it's 30 by 30. I'm not sure how you guys, how many people are familiar with. So there's a federal policy in the US. There's also a policy in Canada for conserving 30% of ecologically valuable land by 2030. And one of the groups here in Western New York, it's called the Western New York Environmental Alliance, that it's a regional group of all of the major environmental organizations in Western New York, who are pushing for more of the local or even a watershed level policy, where we're not just doing, because there's also New York State has a 30 by 30 policy, but the idea should be more spread out and equitably throughout the nation and the continent, really, rather than just 30% of an entire state or an entire country. So Elliot actually joined a meeting with me, talking to them about mapping and how we could potentially use some of the maps that we've been creating to increase public awareness of this, to get people, community members, to be more vocal about wanting more local ordinances that are protecting ecologically viable land, but also how do we define that? And I think that Elliot was really it brought some great insight, because he's helping to work on some of that stuff in Canada, and just talking about how they're using private land and I guess provincial land is what you were calling it. And yeah, Elliot, I don't know if you want to share anything else about that.
There are all kinds of details. Raise your hand if you're interested. We can go with majority vote here for ease of time. No hands. Keep going.
No, let's hear it. I'm fascinated.
Oh, yeah. Like, there's so much. Oh, words. Words are so complicated. And yeah, there's all this like nuance in it, right? It's not just provincial land versus private land. Is the private land even legally owned? Or like, yeah, there's the treaty with the Mississaugas of the Credit, but it was signed under duress. And what about the neutral people? And what about the Wendake people? And what about that we're here right now and that we have like so many crises? So, anyways, little rant about words. But yeah, 30 by 30, any country, nation state that signed on to COP15 in Montreal, that Global Biodiversity Convention, has this 30 by 30 target. So it's really a global target. And governments, by and large, are not able to meet this target that they said that they were going to meet. And there's all kinds of intermediary targets as well that they're not on track for. This is kind of the common story. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions. This is the common story. So they're reaching out to conservation organizations, whether they be land trusts or whatever it may be, to say, hey, can we include your lands? They're reaching out to private landowners and they're saying, hey, you're a church and you own this graveyard, and this graveyard actually has 30% tree cover, and there are some degrees of ecological processes going on. So can now you, without any funding often, can you do all the hard work of like fitting this into our little definition so that we can check a box? And that's maybe the pessimistic view of it, but yeah, that's kind of like a little cliff note of the bigger picture. And then specifically what some of the organizations that I work with are looking into is things like Forest Stewardship Council certified lands, getting those included. Looking at privately owned woodlots and putting them through a screening process so that they can be included. And then we're still just in the ideation phase, but figuring out how to, and yeah, there's still some debate about exactly how this would roll out, but getting landowners to, whether their land actually is ecologically functioning enough to provide some biodiversity, or whether it's not, get them enrolled as long as they commit to doing certain restoration work. And yeah, the piece that still needs to be sorted out there is the value piece. So do the landowners themselves have the ability to do that work that provides any kind of value? Or do we need to train them to do that? Or do we need to have contractors, or, you know, like whatever words we want to use for that type of exchange? Yeah. And that kind of idea, we're calling it nature credits. And the idea is that we can kind of, you know, skillfully, diplomatically Robin Hood some of the money from the big corporations as part of their social responsibility, and that it's not an offsetting program, which, yeah, I will not comment any further about no offsets, but that's enough commenting probably. And but it's just, yeah, you're committed to doing restoration work. Here are the supports to make it happen. And we live in a world where you need like gas or whatever, sometimes pay a mortgage. So here's some money to make that happen.
Yeah, and so thanks, Elliot. That's just, I find that that project to be really interesting, especially because it is something that potentially we could all be working together on, and we could be supporting each other, but that's not really happening at the moment. But I am.
And I'm interested, Elliot, on the money side, because we have properties that either are already fairly well conserved, but could use money to restore them. So is that's the direction, right? The goal is to be able to get some money connected to these pieces of land, and it's not happened yet, or how can we track that, follow that?
Yeah, it hasn't happened yet. And like, that's just like, honestly, I sometimes think that's way more complicated. And I think it might just be way more like, how much money do you have in the bank? Like, for real, like I have over $50,000 in the bank. Right? So what if I took that money and like threw parties for a year? Like parties with purpose. and figured out who the people, and I'm just, cut me off if I'm going on too big of a rant here, but yeah, if I threw parties with, and I'm just thinking of this in the moment, so it's not who knows where this is going to go, but parties with purpose, if I took that and figured out who the people are that are willing to do the work on the land, and figured out, okay, how much of a budget do we need to make sure they've got like food, etc., for the next year, 2, 3 years until we get self-sufficient. This is kind of some of the like modular aspects of what I was talking about earlier. It's like, yes, there's all of this wood that needs to be thinned out of these plantations that are not natural forests, and we can build tiny homes with them, and then we can the tops we can turn into biochar, which we run through compost, so that we can speed up this soil remediation project that normally takes 70 to 90 years to happen in 5 to 10 years or 3 years or 1 year. And we can start to like really produce food, because the economics on money suck. Like if you get a 10% return on investment, that's good. That's really good. A kernel of corn can turn into 480 kernels of corn the next year. That's the kind of return of investment that I'm on. And I don't think that I think money can be leveraged, but I think it's about the people. And I think that often when we try to like raise money and approach it from that way, we get stuck, like, or it's like real mucky soil that is hard to run through fast and doesn't always have the like clay content to make it a nice spa day either. So opinions.
I think that's great. Is that part of, is there a particular initiative associated with this? Or
We are,
What was that?
we are the initiative.
Okay.
Yeah. Like how many organizations are we representing here right now?
Oh, I see. We right here. I mean, with the school, the design school.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. Hi, I'm Elliot. I work for the Ontario Woodlot Association. I work for the Kawartha Land Trust. I have my own business. I volunteer for probably 6, 7 different organizations. I'm helping Anna with Western New York, through the design school. We're connected to these thousands of people. So it's just like, yeah, that's the initiative, whether it is like formally recognized or informally recognized. And there's so many words and like, oh, there's this framework or that framework or blah, 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 blah. It's like, we're not going to figure that out on a Zoom call. And I don't have time to read through all of that stuff and then digest it and put it into like a business plan and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I just want to be outside growing food, like hanging out with people, restoring the forest, talking to birds. Yeah.
And I think that what you're saying too about like money just making everything more complicated versus putting people in contact with each other and building that social and political capital is something that we've definitely heard a lot from various people. I think even when we were talking about dispersing design school funds, that was one thing that we found. It's not necessarily the funds that are needed, it's capacities. Can we get more creative with how we tie people together and bring in this information and share resources in that way. So I know that you were talking specifically about funding for your area, Victoria, but I think that, yeah, Elliot has a really good point in that it's not always just throwing money at something isn't going to solve it.
There's many capitals.
Yeah.
When we were doing our original work in the Chicago area, we had a few kind of guiding questions that helped us to engage other people. We never looked for big funding at the time. It was all very grassroots. And one of the decisions we made early on was that our criteria was, if it's not fun, we don't do it. And we decided that trying to create an organization that was looking to raise funds and so on would not be that much fun. So we just did things like take field trips around our region to discover what's there that we didn't know about and to find some knowledgeable local who could explain it to us. Or, I mean, this is a simple, I'm not opposed to the idea of getting, more formal in some of those things, but we had a few key questions like, well, where does your water come from? And mostly people said the faucet. And I went, "Mhm, well, where does it, where does it come from after, from the faucet?" And trying to discover, because then that area that there was no bioregional definition of, where is the bioregion? So we started asking questions. Well, how would we define the natural boundaries? And we were didn't take too long to figure out. Lake Michigan on one side of Chicago was part of it, and there's two rivers that run down parallel to the lake, and they were more on the western side. And then we couldn't figure out where the southern end would be. And I remember talking once to, because it just wasn't totally obvious to us, but because we or some of us were just so passionate about this, if we found somebody we thought knew anything about it, we'd ask them. And I remember having this conversation with a woman who was very involved with the Lake Michigan Federation. And that's another thing that's another thing I could mention in a minute. But and we were at her place down in the Indiana Dunes and talking about this, and I told about this dilemma, but we weren't exactly sure where the southern end of the bioregion was. And she looked at me like, "Oh, you poor," like I was kind of severely limited in my point of view, which was true. But she helped me to see that it is the Calumet River, which I frankly had never thought too much about. But just having the curiosity as well as what I'm saying, to say, how would we define our particular local region? And it has to do, and another one besides where does the water come from, another one was how do you know it's spring and wherever you are? Because of course, and so people who live more in the prairies had a lot of prairie stories to tell, but others, so those kind of questions that are very basic to understanding what we're talking about, and that people then get. And then one more, and then I'll leave it at another thing. I personally was fascinated to find out is who is the Gary Snyder of our region? Who are people who are writing poetry about the ecosystem and the ecosystem? And sure enough, we found them, and whenever I'd meet somebody who had some knowledge about the moths of the region, I was like so excited. Oh, moths. Yeah, we hadn't thought about them yet, that kind of thing. But somehow at that local level, getting people asking questions and bringing answers together was very nourishing.
Yeah, thanks, Bia. Susie, yes.
A thought or a bunch of thoughts that are just I'm not sure how they fit in, but some of this conversation brought to mind some of the young people I know who are looking for a direction and often don't have much stability in their lives, who want very much to have hope and direction and a positive, some sense that there is a direction beyond the despair. Many of the people, my kids' friends and my kids and myself and so many of us thinking about, okay, well, an answer to the lack of stability. Well, okay, a piece of land, right? We're all looking for a piece of land, and all of these ideas that we've all had, and the energy of the young people with their 3 jobs trying to maintain an apartment, right? And I know that there are potentially wonderfully better places and formats, just developing the bridge between where we are to where we could be. But again, I'm thinking of those young people and their need. I think that there may be some connection between their need and our whatever that means. Those of us who are trying to well, looking for people who could do some of this work, some of this regenerative work. And there's more to it than that. But anyway, I don't want to take up too, that's my insertion of that idea. And now we can see where it goes.
Thanks, Susie. And actually, I have one thing that Elliot shared with me about that's actually could be relevant for Victoria and Jonathan, because this is over by this group is primarily focused on Lake Ontario within New York State, particularly Eastern Lake Ontario, that focuses on learning exchanges and just essentially being more focused on the Great Lakes in general and how you can learn just about more about the place and keeping their the education more place-based about especially STEAM kind of work or education. So
By the way, the Sea Grant people are connected with one of the Rochester groups, ecology groups. They came and did a presentation at a one-day conference. So they're connected. And
great.
they do these boat tour, you know, like that, what is it, a week on a boat for educators on a lake. And this year it was Ontario. I think next year it's Erie, but it goes around the various lakes. And there is this program funded by Sea Grant and their foundations, whatever, that give to them. Very impactful.
Wow, yeah.
Skill development for educators. Skills and
Along those lines, if you ever get to Chicago and the Museum of Natural History, I think it's called, in Lincoln Park, they had the most amazing thing in their museum that I've never seen before or since. It's like a big puzzle of the lakes, you know, this big, and then you can pick up the top of it and really see, oh yeah, Lake Erie is very shallow, and you know, Lake Superior very deep, and you can see some of these characteristics of the different lakes that you could hear about, but that sort of three-dimensional thing of it was just brilliant. And so I mean, I think thinking of things like that if there are any in your region, make them a point on your, you know, your tour. Because they're very self-explanatory almost, or a starting place for that. And when asking about that spring question, how do you know it's spring? We also developed something that we said was the wheel of the year in our region. You know, how do you know it's spring? Because the lake does this, and then the prairies there's that, and there's the homeless are closed because they don't, you know, I mean, we included some social phenomenon as well as the more ecological stuff. And then we went to a gathering, some kind of a convention or meeting of other bioregionalists, and our groups, we stood up in a circle, face 12 of us, one for each month, looking out at the audience, and we moved like a circle, the wheel of the year. And so the person who was January would start off telling what's going on in the bioregion in that month, and we'd take a step to the side, and the February person would go next. I mean, we came up with all kinds of stuff that was very original, very engaging, not hard to do, cheap, but impactful. And so it occurs to me now, just seeing this group and the diversity of places we are, to begin pooling ideas. Well, what did we do to engage people who aren't professional, you know, academics or others in these fields, to help them get a handle of what we're talking about, and just exchange ideas and share that kind of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Yeah. Just kind of starting to share our knowledge and experience of how things are things are going too, if we do try anything. And
Mhm.
actually, I did want to give Jonathan and Victoria an opportunity to provide any updates because they are very engaged in their community as well. So yeah, Victoria and Jonathan, would you like to share?
Jonathan?
Oh, trying to get off mute there. Well, we're still very much at the formative stages in terms of our bioregional learning center, really at the conceptual stage and reaching out to people and trying to form these kinds of alliances. So if you have anything written about what you did, be your kind of the history of your initiative, we'd be very interested in seeing that. Your question provoked me to actually go and find out where does my water come from, and it comes from Lake Ontario. And, although we happen to be living alongside something called Allen's Creek, which is a tributary to the Genesee River, but quite a significant one from what I understand historically. So right now we have a kind of an informal partnership with a property owner who has 73 acres in Honeoye Falls, which is about 20 minutes south of where we are. And we hope to make it the focus of the Bioregional Learning Center in the sense that he's trying to keep it out of development. And we're looking to restore those parts of it that need restoration. And neither Victoria nor I are really experts in this field. So it's sort of like right now we're the blind leading the blind a little bit. But we're persevering. We're impressed that there's a global network now of ecoversities, of bioregional learning centers that are emerging, and to be part of that and to benefit from all that and bring that to this region would be a great accomplishment. Victoria?
I just wanted to add that as we meet people, everyone is interested. People have heard about bioregionalism. A lot of the people, because they're environmentalists, have some connection with the word and the concept. But there's tons of support. We will need money to free up the owner of the property from his job, which allows him to pay the mortgage on the property. Because he did it just, to be able to live on the land which he grew up in, and not have it go into development. He's, he has to have a job, and for him to be able to bring enough economic development to the property as a recreational leader, and he's fairly conventional. They have a couple of pools on the property, so it would be, pools in summer and other recreation, maybe childcare, things like that. But he's very, very interested in all the things that we're talking about, and would love to have us as a tenant or a co-partner in this venture. But everyone who would be interested would need some funds to participate in it in any significant way. So we are not skilled at fundraising. And it's a large thing that we're contending with. How do we bring money to this project for all the things that need to happen? And there certainly are people who could do things on the land, for sure. And we're looking for people who have the interest to spend time on the land doing it. We have some native tribes that are interested in using the land for ceremonial purposes. And we're pursuing that. uh, you know, it's slow because we have other things going on and, you know, and can't spend as much time as we want. But I haven't met a single person who isn't interested.
May the force be with you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Jonathan and Victoria. And Peter had to jump off. Okay. Well, and I think that I know that you have been discussing ways that you think that you can bring a real impact to Rochester too. The idea that diversity, equity, and inclusion is really important in the Rochester community, and how can you make sure that the project is supporting that? Yeah.
Right. Yes. It reminds me of who we need to reach out to. One of our colleagues who put together that one-day program where they had the Sea Grant people. He has contracts with a number of Rochester public schools and doing nature education in the schools. And he's very interested in what we're proposing for the Bioregional Learning Center. And he sees it as the big picture view that connects to the global, whereas he's looking at very here and now exercises with teachers and students, you know, very immediate change, you know, looking to shift attitudes and create interest in nature in a heavily racially segregated community. And so he loves this idea of bioregional, the bioregional global world, because it provides something that he can't provide to his students and teachers, to see how it's all connected. If we do this, it will all, you know, in the nested holes, be very important as the specific of what we're doing inside of the things that everybody else is doing. So, you know, that's part of the nature of the design school, is to get to know all the regenerative projects in the area so they can see their place in the larger place of what's happening that can scale up to the global. Everything makes a difference. And knowing each other and being able to exchange resources is the trick. So we're looking for any kind of people with systems that can take those 8 capitals or numbers of different capitals and put it together so that we can mix people who don't need money, people who do need money, housing, food, transportation, you know, all of the things that we're going to need at the Bioregional Learning Center.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, and any other questions for Jonathan or Victoria?
Isn't your backyard where you're doing all that mulching, Jonathan? Isn't that a bioregional learning center?
Yeah.
Well, you could say so. It really started, it's a quarter acre around our little suburban house. And it really just started as a way to demonstrate that we don't need to keep lawns, that we can actually restore the biodiversity in the soil. So interesting that, you know, I don't really consider it to be that important. You know, it's not that significant an effort, because basically it's a little orchard and a vegetable garden and, you know, a bunch of sheet mulch. But we were listening the other day to Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she was talking about how important it is to transform your dead lawn into a living biosystem. And so we're happy to have accomplished that in the last couple of years, and hope to continue to keep, you know, improving it over the years.
So you don't have to respond to any of this.
No.
which probably goes without saying. But anyways, how many people would you, if any, would you feel comfortable hosting there?
We,
Oh,
people, we could do, and we've had 15, 20. We've probably had 40 or 50 people coming, coming through. So we are making an impact. People are, eyes open and gee, we could do that. Even if we did a piece of it, not the whole yard, but like we did, but yeah. So can you say more? And David, I can see your hand up. Jonathan and I probably don't give the project the credit that it needs, so that, because other people are blown away by it and we're like, we did this. So
Mhm.
So what you're saying reminds me of Rob and Michelle Avis out in Calgary. They were both engineers in the oil industry. And upon seeing a 3-minute clip of restoring greening the desert of happening in Jordan near the Dead Sea, where the permaculture project was set up, on the basis of that short clip, they quit their jobs, started transforming their suburban Calgary property into permaculture. So rather than a lawn, they've got a food forest. They've started working on water harvesting because it's quite arid there in Calgary, and they're harvesting something like 300, thousands of liters of water a year in underground cisterns, and they've building like one step at another, and it's their business of, they call it Verge Permaculture.ca, and so they've transformed their business into teaching farmers and everybody how to do permaculture. But in their food cluster, so their suburban property became a community center. Like it just became natural. People would go by and pick the raspberries and whatever. But it just and that is no quarter acre. It was just a regular suburban prairie lot. So anyway, it's not a community center as such, but it is a kind of a hub, and certainly a space for learning.
well, that's what we're doing. We
Yeah,
just
well,
got
exactly.
in the living room so that we can put all of Jonathan's library out there and people can actually look at it. He's, been collecting books, reading books.
Yeah. Anyway, they're remarkable. They do workshops all over the place.
That's
and,
great.
And they got 2 or 3 young kids, and they just keep doing it.
That's the key. Just keep doing it.
Yeah, and I know that I've seen that Patty Love too is starting to host. She posted something on meetups, and she's starting to do something with the permaculture garden. So I'm wondering if I think that that's a great idea to utilize your yard, and even with her also getting back into hosting things, that might be a really good way to start the network again.
Mhm. Yeah, we had Patty come and talk to about 15, 20 people
okay.
last month. So she designed the property. Thank you. It's empowering to hear that. Small things keep going. Is it BEA? How do you say it? How do you spell your name? Bea?
Me, Bea, BEA, short for Beatrice.
I like that.
I'll answer to Beatrice, Bea, other variations.
Sure.
But it's so energizing for me to be back in conversation with people who are addressing these issues. And the beauty of it is that there's so many ways and things that you can do. The very first event we had in Chicago was in the basement of a big Episcopal cathedral, because I had a friend who was a minister there, and that's so they loaned us this space. And we had like 60 people there. It was amazing, in a big circle, and we had different speakers and breakout things and one thing and another. But I'll share this with you, as you never know when you might be able to use it. So David Hankey, Haenke, Hankey, he's originally from Michigan, but he's been living in the Ozarks for a long time, and they have a very strong group there called the Ozark Area Congress or something like that. Oak, I think they call it. Anyway, so I got this inspiration one morning that we needed to have in the Chicago area a convening, a get together of someone that included, I'm talking just of speakers and things, someone from the Friends of the Chicago River, key thing, element. The Lake Michigan, another key thing. The Chicago River, the Nature Conservancy, because they knew about the tree, and the Prairie Restoration people. I think that was the sort of 4 people. And I told this when I got this inspiration one morning that we needed to convene this kind of a group. And I knew that it had to be beyond just the city limits of Chicago into the some of the nearby suburbs. And I called a friend of mine who was running an ecumenical study center or something on the north side of Chicago. And I told him what I was thinking, and would he help just to publicize the event among his people up on the North Shore. And he said, sure, but where are you going to get 4 good speakers? It's hard enough to get one. And you're talking about the river and the lake and this, that. I have no idea, but I'll find out. It was that absolute ignorance. And it turned out that none of them had been on the same platform with the other 3. So just something as simple as that can make a big difference. And the last thing I'll say about that event, because we were so ignorant, we knew that we had discovered in our early studying that Chicago was Potawatomi for a place of the smelly onion. Because in the spring, in those rivers and other wet areas, these members of the allium family, the onions, would spring up and you could smell them because there wasn't a lot of other construction and things at that time. So the indigenous people called it Chicago. All right, fine. So we have this event in the basement in February. And if any of you know Chicago in February, just forget about it. It's really cold and everything, but we were in a nice, cozy basement. We had these people in a big circle. We had these wonderful speakers from the 4 organizations. And then I had brought along, the only onion I thought to get was one of those big red onions, and I think they have another name too. And we passed it around like a talking stick, except it was, so the person who was speaking was the one who had the onion in their hand, because we called it the Wild Onion Alliance, the place, and the Wild Onion Bioregion, because that's how we just decided to define it. And it's entirely the wrong. Those red onions are from Bermuda, or I don't know where, but it was from a different. But it didn't matter. As long as you are just, symbolically, each person had this onion in their hand, and they passed it around the whole circle, and it was a magical day on this middle of February Chicago afternoon. And when people left, they sort of didn't want to go. There was something so binding about it. And so I guess and David Henke, this is the last little piece of inspiration you might do. So he gave the introductory talk about the concept of bioregionalism in general. Then we heard the specifics of things in our region. And so when he finished his talk, which wasn't that long, he said, okay, I'm going to count to 3 or 5 or something. And when I do that, you're invited to jump up in the air. And then when you come down, you're going to be re-entering your bioregion. So he counts back 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. People jump up, and when they land, he says, welcome home. Simple and unforgettable. Unforgettable. Welcome home. Here you are, all of you, So I just encourage you to keep thinking of opportunities. You don't have to have the idea itself, what to do, but to think, who knows something who could bring it to the table and share it, and we could enjoy it together and jump up this far off the ground and come down to our place. That was fascinating. So I'll be happy to share more
Very
ideas.
creative ideas. What do you do what have you been doing in Mexico, and what do you do in general?
Well, and now in Mexico and so on, I'm a facilitator, a group facilitator with the International Association of Facilitators, certified, etc. But what I was doing in Chicago was I was a yoga teacher.
Mhm.
You know, just another. But it did, you know, and so, and the people that we got involved with there were, we seek out. Somebody knows something about, you know, the plant life or whatever it was. We one time organized a 2 or 3 day, I forget what we called it, but anyway, a get together of people from, some are from Canada, Toronto area and stuff like that, and then around. And oh, wait a minute. So, and we had, part of it was a work, one of the days, the morning was spent on a work day, on a go discover something about this bioregion, and our members were the ones who guided those tours, and their instructions were to come up with an idea that was something you would not find on the gray, but you know, those tourist buses in Chicago. You know, you're going to see something that you think is significant and in this region, and that you can get there by public transportation or walking or whatever, because we had no money for buses or anything like that. And so people then, some of them became experts in their own area in a way that they had never even thought of, you know, by taking other people with them. And one of the we had some people who were coming, I think David Henke might have been one of them from the Ozarks, but they were a little leery about homeless problems and things like that. So we had, one of the field trips was to go visit a homeless center and meet the people that, and da. I mean, whatever it was, we just, none of this cost very much money. And either we had no budget whatsoever. I mean, we had a very small budget, but it was all very homegrown and very real, and very engaging and life-changing for most of us, certainly for me.
Yeah.
So just go for it.
Yeah, and we only have a couple of minutes left, and I saw that Elliot had unmuted himself. Elliot, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to share before we end.
I was gonna ask how much the mortgage was on that 73 acres a month.
Oh, that's a good question.
I
That's a great
believe it's about 600,000.
For the
And-
property, I think the property was 600,000. And I don't know if he had any money down. He actually doesn't own it. Somebody else owns it, who who bought it for him, and he's paying that person back. So I'm sure that they organized a reasonable amount per month that he could handle. But tell me more. So we're looking for whatever that amount is per month, the guy's living expenses. That's what we're looking for a month. And you're right, it's much more feasible if you actually know how much does he need. But go ahead, good idea.
Well, this is just an idea, right? And I'm sure we can come up with, maybe 12 of us or 13 of us rotating around in a circle, each telling our idea. But part of what my work is negotiating timber sales. And part of my work is also being friends with people like guitar makers that can take a board foot of timber, and rather than sell it for $3 or $6 a board foot, sell it for $400 or $500, or, you know, with a little bit of labor, $3,000 or $10,000 a board foot. This is a model that is used in like the city of Bremen in Germany, where they're able to maintain a very highly diverse forest with lots of recreation, blah, 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 blah. But they tell a really good story, and they get people who are willing to spend a lot of money on specialty wood products, like if they want this timber framed home or whatever. And yeah, like.
Wow, that's brilliant. That's really, so people do it knowing that they can tell the story about their product that differentiates it by paying more for the materials. You know,
Yeah.
because it comes from the place. That's
And I'm
really
not saying take any tree, like do this in a way that's responsible and does maintain or enhance the overall ecological integrity of the place. But yeah, we've been cutting trees for a long time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Obviously, whatever the economics, whatever the products that could be made on the land, that's, you know, how we're gonna pay it back. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. Well, I do want to acknowledge that we are slightly over time. So if you got to jump, feel no worries. But otherwise, I would like to go around and just have everybody, if you want to give like a 1 or 2 word checkout on how you're leaving us. We'll see you guys either next week if you want to show up for a campfire, or 4 weeks from now for this next meeting. Victoria, would you like to start off?
Yeah. Reinforcing and energizing. Bia?
I feel like I found my tribe. Let's see, who else? Jonathan?
Sure. Really appreciate the conversation. Elliot?
Yeah, if it's like a 25-year mortgage with no interest, it'd be $2,000 a month. Susie.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Well, gratitude and hopefully integration. And David.
Engaging is my word. And I'll pass it on to Anna.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Grateful for all you guys. All right. I hope everybody has a great night.
Yes, you too. Thanks,
You
Anna,
too.
for doing this.
Thanks.
Everybody. Bye.